There's nothing more devastating than believing you've built the perfect life with the people you trust most, only to find that everything you thought was unbreakable was built on lies. Imagine spending years investing your love, your time, your heart, and your soul into the people closest to you, only to be betrayed by the very people you thought you could count on. The pain is unbearable, and the anger, it consumes you. This is the story of my life, of how betrayal shattered everything, how I was left in the wreckage, and how karma delivered the most unexpected, poetic justice I could have ever imagined. For years, I thought I had it all. I had a beautiful wife, Emma, whom I loved more than life itself. We were married for 5 years, but we had been together for 7. She was everything I had ever dreamed of, intelligent, compassionate, driven, and incredibly beautiful. When she laughed, it was infectious, and her smile lit up every room. People could feel the love we shared just by being around us. She was my partner, my best friend, my confidant. We'd built a life together that seemed so perfect. Every Sunday, we'd go out to our favorite brunch spot, laughing and planning our next vacation. We spent hours talking about our future, about growing old together, raising kids, and sharing all those moments that define a life well lived. We weren't just husband and wife. We were best friends. Then there was Luke, my best friend, the man who had been there with me through thick and thin. We met in high school, bonding over shared interests and an unspoken brotherhood that grew stronger every year. Luke and I spent countless late-night talks about everything: the future, women, dreams, fears. He was the person I went to when life got tough, the guy I turned to for advice, the one I trusted more than anyone else. He was my best man at our wedding, standing there beside me as I vowed to love Emma forever. And in the years that followed, he became like a brother to me. I would never have imagined that the man I trusted the most would be capable of the betrayal that would destroy everything. The warning signs were subtle at first. Luke went through a tough breakup with his longtime girlfriend, Sarah. He was devastated, and I understood. Breakups are hard, especially when you've invested so much into a relationship. Emma, being the kind-hearted person she was, wanted to help him through it. She asked if it was okay for her to grab coffee with him one afternoon, just to offer her perspective as a woman. At the time, I didn't think anything of it. I trusted Emma, and I trusted Luke. After all, he was my best friend. We had all spent time together. Vacations, barbecues, weekends away. Emma and Luke had always gotten along. What could possibly go wrong? But that evening, something changed in her. When she returned from coffee, she was angrier than I had ever seen her. "He deserves better," she snapped. "Any woman would be lucky to have him." It didn't make sense. Emma had always been calm, measured, and thoughtful, especially when it came to her words. But tonight, there was an edge to her voice, an anger that didn't match the situation. It didn't sit right with me, but I ignored it. I shrugged it off as her being emotional about Luke's breakup. What I didn't realize was that this was the first crack in the foundation of our relationship, and I had missed it. After that evening, Emma started pulling away. At first it was small things. She became distant. Her smile wasn't as bright, her words were shorter, and she seemed distracted, lost in her thoughts. But it was more than that. The intimacy between us began to feel forced. There were nights where I tried to connect, to hold her, to kiss her, but it felt like she was just going through the motions. It was as if she wasn't really there with me. She started going out more often, claiming she was meeting with friends or running errands, but the excuses were vague and the details never added up. And when I asked about them, she would deflect, telling me it was nothing, just a casual hangout. She had never been like this before. Emma had always been open with me about everything. Now, she was more secretive than I had ever seen her. Tried to confront her, but every time I did, she would brush me off, telling me I was overreacting, that everything was fine. But it wasn't fine. I knew it, deep down. Meanwhile, Luke, my best friend, started becoming even more distant. He didn't answer my calls or texts as quickly as he used to. When we did see each other, he seemed different. Fidgety, avoiding eye contact, and constantly glancing at his phone. The easy, carefree man I had spent so many years with was no longer the same. He was withdrawn, uncomfortable. He started making excuses not to hang out, claiming he was too busy or had other things going on. I tried to ignore it. I tried to tell myself that I was just paranoid, that this was all in my head. But the unease continued to build, the silence between Emma and me growing louder with each passing day. "Hey man, we need to talk." It was Luke. The message was short and to the point, and something in me instantly knew that something terrible was about to happen. I showed up at his apartment, my heart racing, my stomach twisting in knots. But when I walked through the door, I wasn't prepared for what I saw. There was Emma sitting on his couch, her face tear-streaked. She wouldn't look at me. Luke stood up, and the moment his eyes met mine, I knew. "Mark," he said, his voice shaky. "There's no easy way to say this, but Emma and we're in love." It felt like the ground dropped out from under me. I couldn't breathe. My mind was spinning, unable to process the words coming from his mouth. My best friend and my wife, the woman I built my entire life with, were in love. How? Why? I couldn't understand it. My body went numb as I searched their faces, hoping, praying that this was some sick joke. But the guilt in their eyes told me it wasn't. Emma's voice trembled as she apologized, but I couldn't listen to her words. I couldn't hear them. It was like everything went silent. The life I had worked so hard to build, the trust, the love, the family, was gone. I didn't know who these people were anymore. They were strangers in my own home. Luke tried to justify himself. "It was just an emotional affair," he said, as if that made it any better. "We didn't mean for it to happen. It just did." But nothing he said could make the pain go away. The woman I loved had betrayed me, and so had my best friend. The betrayal was so raw, so deep, it felt like my entire world was collapsing around me. I had lost everything in an instant. Emma moved out the next week. I couldn't bear to look at her, to hear her voice. She kept texting, calling, pleading for forgiveness, but I couldn't bring myself to respond. The pain was too much, and I didn't know how to make sense of any of it. The woman I thought I would spend the rest of my life with, and my best friend, the two people I trusted above all, had ripped my heart apart. Months passed, and I started to heal. Slowly. I threw myself into therapy, into self-improvement, into moving forward. But just when I thought I was beginning to find peace, Emma showed up at my door. She looked different, pale, fragile, almost defeated. "I just wanted to tell you, we're trying to have a baby," she said quietly. The words hit me like a punch to the stomach. The family we had dreamed of, the future we had planned, was no longer mine to have. She had given it all to Luke. I wasn't part of their story anymore. It was as if everything I had worked for, everything I had hoped for, had been stolen in one moment. But that wasn't the end of the story. Karma had other plans. A few weeks later, a mutual friend called me. Luke had begun suspecting that Emma was cheating on him. It turns out that the same thing she had done to me, being secretive with her phone, staying out late, avoiding him, had started happening to Luke. He began to notice the signs, the same cracks I had ignored in her behavior. He started feeling the same paranoia, the same doubts. Luke reached out to the same friends who had warned me about Emma, the same ones who had tried to tell me what was happening behind my back. And now, Luke was on the receiving end of his own betrayal. It was the ultimate irony. The perfect love story they had built on lies was beginning to crumble. If you've ever been betrayed, you know the pain, the confusion, and the anger. But remember, karma is real. It always comes back around. If you've experienced betrayal, drop a comment below. Let's talk about it. And if you believe in karma, don't forget to like and share, because in the end, karma always comes back around. Now it's time we listen to the second story for the day. I found out my wife had an affair while I was working nights. The shocking truth ruined our perfect family. How do you rebuild your life when the perfect family you thought you had crumbles before your eyes? What do you do when everything you thought was rock solid turns out to be a lie? I was a man who had everything I could ever want. A beautiful wife, 2 incredible kids, a nice house, and a stable job. We looked like the ideal family from the outside, the kind of life everyone dreamed of. But beneath that perfect image, betrayal was festering. I thought we were untouchable, but when the truth came out, everything shattered. This is the story of how my world was torn apart, and how I'm trying to rebuild from the wreckage. My name is John, and I was living the life that many men dream about. I had a loving wife, Samantha, and together we were raising 2 beautiful boys, Ethan, 11, and Zachary, 8, in a picturesque town nestled in the mountains of Colorado. I was in my early 30s, working a job I enjoyed as a police officer, and Samantha was a stay-at-home mom. From the outside, we were the definition of a perfect family. We lived in a cozy, 4-bedroom home in a peaceful neighborhood, where kids played outside and neighbors waved hello as they passed by. We attended church on Sundays, had family movie nights on Fridays, and I coached Ethan's soccer team. I was proud of the life we had built. Samantha was stunningly beautiful, and she knew it. It was something that always made me proud. She was the kind of woman that drew eyes when she walked into a room. And for years, I was convinced I was the only man who truly mattered to her. But I couldn't see the cracks beneath the surface. The signs were there, but I ignored them. It wasn't until 2015 that everything changed. It started small. Samantha began taking me time, which seemed harmless at first. She'd go out once a month, run some errands, maybe go shopping. I thought it was a healthy way for her to get a break from the constant demands of raising young kids. I didn't think much of it when she started spending more time away. At the time, I was busy with work, trying to balance shifts and family life. I was a good dad. I made sure Ethan and Zachary had everything they needed. I worked hard to give them a good life. But somewhere along the way, I missed something bigger. The growing distance between Samantha and me. After a few months of these shopping trips, something didn't feel right. Samantha would come home late, often smelling faintly of alcohol. She'd be distant, like she wasn't really there with me. She'd brush off my attempts to communicate, and the excuses she gave for her whereabouts seemed flimsy at best. The worst part was, I began to feel a gnawing sense of discomfort, an instinct telling me something was wrong, but I couldn't put my finger on it. So I did what any husband would do. I gave her the benefit of the doubt. I told myself it was nothing, just a phase. She was probably just stressed, trying to cope with the demands of motherhood. It wasn't until she got really defensive about her outings that I started paying closer attention. The turning point came one night after my late shift. I came home expecting to find Samantha asleep in our bed, but she wasn't there. At 5 a.m., I began to panic. I called her and texted her, but there was no reply. When she finally came home, hours later, I could tell something was off. She reeked of alcohol, and her hair was disheveled. When I asked her where she had been, she gave me the same excuse as before. I fell asleep at a friend's house. But I knew it wasn't true. Something snapped inside me. I couldn't ignore the signs anymore. I had to know the truth. I took her phone, the one place I could find answers. What I found shattered me. Text after text, message after message. Samantha had been carrying on an affair with a man she met through a local moms group. I read their messages, flirty, intimate exchanges that went on for months. She had even told him that we were in the process of getting a divorce, which was a complete lie. The realization hit me hard. The woman I thought I knew, the woman I loved, had been living a double life. I confronted her the next morning, holding the phone in my hand, showing her everything. Her face went pale as she admitted to everything. She had been seeing him behind my back for months. The pain was almost unbearable. I wanted to scream, to lash out, but instead, I just stood there in stunned silence. The weeks following that confrontation were filled with turmoil. I couldn't stop thinking about the lies, the betrayal, the secret life she had been living without me. Every day felt like I was walking through a fog of hurt and anger. Samantha begged for forgiveness. She cried, said she was sorry, promised it would never happen again. She told me that she had made a mistake, that it was a moment of weakness, and that it meant nothing. But I didn't believe her. How could I? How could I trust anything she said after everything I'd discovered? The hardest part was not just the affair itself, but the lies. The fact that she had been lying to me every single time she came home from one of those shopping trips. The fact that she had been so confident in her deceit. My trust in her was broken beyond repair, and no amount of apologies could fix that. As time went on, I tried to hold everything together for the sake of our kids. Ethan and Zachary didn't deserve to see their family torn apart, but I couldn't ignore the pain I was feeling. It ate at me day after day. I couldn't look at Samantha the same way anymore. The love I once had for her felt hollow, replaced by resentment and doubt. But there was a part of me that still wanted to make things work. I wanted to believe that we could move past it. I wanted to believe that for the sake of our children, we could rebuild our relationship. Samantha did everything she could to win my forgiveness. She agreed to therapy, promised to cut off all contact with the man she had cheated with, and began attending support groups for couples dealing with infidelity. She even said she would stop drinking, acknowledging that it had been part of the problem. But despite her efforts, I could never shake the feeling that something was off. The betrayal had dug too deep into my soul, and every time we tried to move forward, the past loomed over us like a shadow. Fast forward to 2019. Despite everything we had been through, I couldn't shake the nagging feeling that Samantha hadn't been fully honest with me. One day, Ethan came home and mentioned a man he had played with at the park. Mom's friend, he called him. The name didn't sound familiar, so I pressed Samantha about it. She assured me it was just a friend from her mom's group, but my gut told me there was more to it. I couldn't let it go. I reached out to the man. What he told me confirmed my worst fears. He told me that Samantha had led him to believe they were in a serious relationship, even though she had claimed we were in the process of divorcing. He told me that they had met up several times, including once at our house while I was working. This time, I couldn't ignore it any longer. It was the final straw. I began making plans for a divorce. The pain had become unbearable. I couldn't keep living in the past. The lies, the betrayal, it had all taken its toll. But the hardest part wasn't just leaving Samantha. It was the impact on our children. I couldn't help but wonder what kind of future they would have if we split up. I didn't want them to feel abandoned or torn between two parents. But deep down, I knew it was the right thing to do. As I look back on everything, I'm still struggling with the aftermath. The wounds are deep, and I'm still processing everything. But I've come to realize that my kids deserve a happy, healthy future. One where they don't have to witness the emotional turmoil of their parents. Now, as I navigate the painful process of divorce, I'm focused on rebuilding my life, one step at a time. I have to find a way to heal, for my sake. And for the sake of my boys, I need your advice. How do you cope with the betrayal of a partner who once seemed perfect? How do you rebuild trust when everything you thought you knew is shattered? If you've been through something like this, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment, subscribe for updates, and share this story with others who might be going through something similar. If this story resonates with you, if you've been through the pain of betrayal, or if you just want to support someone going through it, don't hesitate to leave a comment. Tell me your story. Let's keep this conversation going. And please, if you want to hear more about how I'm navigating this journey, hit that subscribe button. Together, we'll figure out how to heal, move on, and find peace.